What's up guys, Enkiri here. And today is going to be the third installment of my Form Check Friday series where we'll be doing a technique analysis of the one and only Larry Wheels. After my last video on Johnny Candido's squat, I got multiple requests to do a video on Larry, and I've really enjoyed watching his insane feats of strength these past few years, so I thought this one would be a cool one to add to the series. For those of you who somehow don't know about Larry Wheels, well, he began his meteoric rise just a few short years ago as an up-and-coming powerlifter. And since then, he's broken multiple all-time world records across several weight classes. He's competed in strongman, he's competed in bodybuilding, and he's basically become a famous YouTuber and Instagrammer, amassing a following of millions of fans on social media seemingly overnight. Larry is strong as ever-loving hell, he's jacked out of his skull, and he knows a thing or two about training hard and leaving it all on the platform. So today we'll be taking a look at some footage of him performing some heavy deadlifts, and we'll see if we can break down his technique. We'll dissect the good parts, some of the less than stellar parts, and we'll see if we can identify any inefficiencies present that might potentially help him lift more weight if he were to correct them. So let's get to it. Now for starters, I'm only going to base my analysis on footage of Larry performing heavy singles, either in preparation for a powerlifting competition or actually on the platform at one of his meets. However, what I don't want to do is look at what has become his normal training footage and include that as part of my analysis. And my reason for that is, when Larry is not specifically preparing for a meet, he's no longer really a strength athlete anymore. Instead, he's become more of a performer and a showman. His brand is even called PR merch or something like that. So everything he does on camera pretty much has to be an attempt at some sort of a crazy personal record. So his deadlift sets, for example, have a tendency to become these sloppy bounce and go AMRAP sets where he's pulling 5 reps with a weight that he could maybe pull for a double if he wasn't slingshotting it off the floor, or he squats super high in training just to hit a big PR, or he'll wear elbow wraps and bounce the bar off his chest to hit a bench PR, or he just half reps his bench presses so that he can hit a crazy rep PR with something insane like 500 pounds. Whatever the tactic being used is, the point is that these lifts are demonstrations more than anything else. They're more equivalent to what the old-time circus performers used to do. It's a show. It's entertaining to watch, and it shows us all his ridiculous, damn near superhuman levels of strength, but it's not really training anymore. It's a demonstration. It's an exhibition. And because they're designed purely for entertainment, these demonstrations have a tendency to get pretty sloppy. So it wouldn't be fair to analyze those lifts when he has real training lifts and real competition lifts where he actually has pretty damn good form. And so those are the lifts that I want to look at and analyze today, and I just figured that I would make that point clear from the beginning. One thing I've always admired about Larry's deadlift is the aggressive dip, grip, and rip style that he utilizes on all of his heavy pulls. There's just something mesmerizing about seeing someone stand over top of a barbell loaded with an insane amount of weight, and before you can even blink, they've reached down, grabbed a hold of it, and already stood back up with the weight in their hands. John Heck, who's another incredibly talented world record holding powerlifter, also utilizes this technique, and it leaves me with the same sense of awe in his case as well. Now, this is a very difficult skill to master, and it's not going to be ideal for everybody, but for the guys who can pull it off and thrive with it, I think that there are some extra style points we can give them because it's just fucking cool to watch. As an added benefit, it probably maximizes the amount of assistance that you can get from the stretch reflex during a deadlift, which is to say it's still not very much assistance in general, but if there is any one technique that maximizes that small amount of assistance, this is probably it. I've even started messing around with this style a little bit myself lately, as I've started doing some stiff leg deadlifts these last few weeks in my own training, which are a slightly simpler deadlift variation, and they make the dip, grip, and rip style a little bit easier to pull off without botching things. And Anecdotally, it does feel like it makes a little bit of a difference as far as the stretch reflex is concerned. I feel more powerful ripping the bar off the floor than I do setting up in the bottom position and pumping my hips a few times like I usually do. Still, it's easier to potentially get out of groove or botch your technique when you're aggressively dipping and gripping and ripping like this. So it is a trade-off that should be weighed for every individual before you settle on using it or not yourself. As far as Larry's actual setup goes, it is overall incredibly solid and compact. He takes a stance that's about hip width with his feet turned out the tiniest amount, but pretty much pointed straight ahead, and he sets his shins up just a few inches behind the barbell. He then takes in a big breath of air, braces his core, and dips down to grip the barbell. After he dips down, it only takes him 1 or 2 seconds at the very most to set his grip, and at that point his body is already in the set position to begin the pull. His setup at this point, just prior to the pull, is fantastic. The barbell is situated right about over the middle of the foot, with the shoulders positioned directly over top of the weight. The shoulders are also positioned higher than the hips, and the hips are positioned higher than the knees. I am sure that Ripito, for example, would say that his hips are often set too low for what he would consider ideal, but I personally don't necessarily agree with that. And it's not that he gets some supreme level of leg engagement off the floor or anything like that. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that his pull is actually quite back dominant overall. But the legs are definitely contributing to getting things going, and you can just see that as he begins the lift. Not only that, but the setup just works for him, and there is something to be said for that. Lastly, there's a minor to moderate amount of rounding in the middle and upper back when he's in the set position prior to initiating the pull. It's tough to say just how much rounding is present because his erector muscles in his back are huge, which can give the illusion that there is more rounding than there actually is, but it's safe to say that there is at least some. Now, it's generally accepted at this point that it's not a huge deal in regard to these specific segments of the back presenting with a bit of rounding during a deadlift. The lower back, on the other hand, is a more at-risk area as far as rounding is concerned, but he sets this segment in a neutral position at the beginning of the pull, which is good. Overall, Larry's deadlift setup is quite solid and efficient, and it works incredibly well for him. He sets his body up in a compact and mechanically advantageous manner and makes use of his many strengths to put his body in a position to rip as much weight off the floor as humanly possible, given his current levels of total body strength. As he initiates the pull off the floor, things are generally very solid. Occasionally, he experiences some minor hip rising before the bar breaks contact with the ground. As well, he also occasionally experiences some minor rounding at the lower back as the stress that is being shifted off the hips makes its way to the back instead. This only happens during max effort pulls, and funny enough, it only really seems to happen in the gym during his training sessions. Whereas from the footage I've been able to find, pretty much all of his competition pulls are rock fucking solid. It's not the best angle here, but even his missed third attempt with 900 pounds during this RPS meet, which he managed to get up to his knees before he apparently lost it due to grip, looks very, very solid up to that point. No lumbar rounding appears to be present, and the bar breaks off the ground without any apparent technical degradation at all. Contrast that with his previous gym PRs of 840 pounds and 855 pounds, and we can see that there's some minor but definite rounding going on here during both of these pulls after the lower back has already been set in a neutral position. On the other hand, if we observe his heaviest ever successful deadlifting competition, or at least I believe this is his heaviest ever meet deadlift that he's done up to this point, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, we can see again here that his back position does not change from how it is set when he initiates the pull, which is a good thing. The other thing to note is that all of the pulls where I was able to find this lumbar rounding occurring all took place back in late 2017 or early to mid 2018, whereas his recent competition list where he's lifting roughly the same weights are from this current year. And that rounding that was present previously no longer seems to be present now. So now we know his absolute strength in the deadlift hasn't gone up since 2018, seeing as how he pulled 900 pounds in the gym with no straps back in April of 2018, and he has not yet beaten that lift. However, if we compare his first 855-pound pull from October of 2017, roughly 3 years ago, which took place in training, to his most recent 855-pound pull from just March of 2020, which took place in a competition, we can see there is a pretty vast improvement in his technique here, even in the absence of absolute strength gains. This indicates that even with all of his circus show stunts that he's been doing these last couple of years to generate popularity and income, he has still managed to mature as a lifter and increase the efficiency of his motor patterns. Now, that's actually pretty remarkable when you stop and think about it, because for a while there at least, he was posting junk show-off lifting footage multiple times a week, which could have easily screwed up his motor patterns, but yet somehow, in spite of that, he seems to actually have become a better deadlifter than he was previously. And finally, as the bar breaks off the floor, there is no front to back shifting or lateral deviation, which are things you often see when the bar first comes off the ground during a deadlift. Instead, it jolts up powerfully and explosively in what appears to be a perfectly straight line, which is highly efficient, and then the bar continues in this optimal trajectory until it's just below his knees. Given the weights that he uses and the aggressiveness with which he initiates his pulls, this is a very, very impressive feat to pull off. As it stands, his pull off the floor is very solid. He attacks the weight aggressively, he has improved his body positions over time, and the bar path up to this point is pretty much ideal. So those are all very, very good attributes. As he enters a transitional phase and the bar approaches and crosses over the knees, things remain pretty well on point overall. The weight continues to accelerate during the transitional period, and the hips and knees extend evenly the whole way through, right up until the bar is settled on the thighs. At that point, the knees are almost locked out, indicating that the legs have just about finished playing their role in the lift. From here, the hips are punched through to a fully extended position, and the shoulders are pulled back, leaving Larry standing tall with a massive weight in his hands. Now I'm going to nitpick just two things real quick. The first of which I believe is actually holding Larry back by a small margin, and the second of which is in reality kind of a crapshoot, but I feel should be noted anyway. So firstly, at the transition, we can see that on max effort pulls on the supinated side, the bar pretty much always gets away from him, at least a little bit. And then after clearing the knees, he has to reel it back in onto his thighs to complete the lockout. He's so damn explosive and is able to accelerate the bar off the floor to such a degree, even at maximal weights, that he's typically able to use that previously achieved momentum to help him reel the bar back in and overcome this inefficiency, resulting in a no harm, no foul type of situation. However, if he were able to keep the bar in a better overall position during this transition, not only would it make all of his lockouts easier and smoother regardless, but this increase in lifting efficiency would also increase his lifting potential. Like I said, he is super explosive off the floor, and he relies on this great acceleration of the barbell to carry him through to the lockout. But when you get too close to maximum weights or slightly above maximum weights, no matter how explosive you are, you lose some of that acceleration. That's just a fact of lifting weights, and that's going to make the lockout either really difficult or even impossible at these weights, since the momentum that he relies upon so heavily is no longer present in full effect. But if he could keep the bar in a better position during the transitional phase, he wouldn't need so much of this momentum to begin with, because he would already be in a more mechanically advantageous position to complete the lockout. This means he would have a much better chance of locking out these ultra heavy weights that he occasionally misses, typically due to his grip giving out before he can do so. So it's kind of a race against the clock in that regard. But increase the efficiency of the transitional phase and you increase the likelihood that the bar will be locked out quickly before the time expires. It's a simple concept and it's easy for me to stand here and say it, but it's easier said than done when you have 900 pounds in your hands. But still, it should be noted, as I do believe that overcoming this inefficiency would have a real impact on his deadlift. And the second thing I want to note is at the lockout itself, where Larry sometimes demonstrates a slightly soft knee lockout, indicating a back dominant movement here to complete the extension of the hips and bring his torso to a fully erect position, where instead it should be the glutes bearing the brunt of the burden here. Now, his back is obviously incredibly strong, so he can get away with this action pretty much entirely to little performance detriment during his deadlifts. However, it's still worth noting for two reasons. One, you can get red lighted in powerlifting for having soft knees at the lockout of a deadlift. Is it likely that any judge is going to red light Larry Wheels, now that he is Larry Wheels, for having slightly soft knees at the lockout of a super heavy deadlift that seals an all-time record attempt? Hell fucking no. Just like no ref is going to call an offensive foul on Michael Jordan for pushing off in the final seconds of Game 6 of the NBA Finals. But still, could they if they wanted to? Yes, they could. It is within the rules to do so, so its presence should be noted. And secondly, back health is also a potential concern here in the long run. Like I alluded to earlier, I do not really believe that this minor lack of glute involvement is holding back Larry's performance at all. And I'm not a PT, so I'm not going to feed you that line. However, it does indicate a potential over-reliance on using the lower back to help achieve extension of the hips. And Larry is a big guy who lifts superhuman weights. That's literally his job. So the potential problem here is that a pattern like that being present here during a deadlift is also likely to be present during other activities and exercises as well. And cumulatively, especially coupled with the incredible amount of compressive and shear forces that Larry consistently subjects his spine to, that can potentially have a degenerative effect on the lower back. So that's the main concern here. It's not really a performance concern in my opinion, so much as a longevity concern and a quality of life after lifting sort of concern. Now, to his credit, he has actually reduced the severity of this issue to a pretty decent degree in recent history. Again, if we look at his older 840-pound pull, we can see easily that the glutes are spent as he's holding the bar here. They cannot achieve hip extension. He's just leaning back and transferring all that stress onto his lower back instead. And then, if we compare that to his 855-pound pull from earlier this year, we can see that the issue is actually much less pronounced. He's not leaning back anymore, and there's no exaggerated pulling back of the shoulder blades. Instead, the glutes are engaged to keep the body rigid and help keep the weight in the position at the lockout. The knees are perhaps slightly soft, indicating that the issue is still present to a minor degree, but it has been improved upon immensely, which is nice to see. Overall though, his form is actually pretty damn textbook here during this phase. There are a couple minor hiccups here and there, but the bar path is overall solid, his body positions are overall solid, his pull is aggressive and powerful, he accelerates the bar from the lower shin all the way through to the transition, the lockout is actually pretty damn strong all things considered, the weights he lifts are simply fucking inhuman, and he has demonstrated an ability to continually improve the efficiency of his lifting mechanics these past couple years, which is nice to see because it means that not only will we all likely have the pleasure of being able to watch him lift for a longer period of time, but it also means that he will likely be able to leave the game on his own terms without being so beaten up by it that he can barely walk anymore. And it's unfortunate to see that kind of thing happen, but when heavy anabolics are involved and weight weights like this, superhuman weights like this, are consistently being hoisted, it is a real cause for concern. One need look no further than the legendary Ronnie Coleman for a living cautionary tale of that sort. So that was quite a doozy, but now that we've touched on all the finer points of Larry's deadlift form, let's get to the rating. And based on everything we've covered today, I give Larry Wheels' deadlift technique 4 out of 5 stars. The man is explosive as hell, he's strong as hell, his mechanics are solid, and they're getting better with time. To be perfectly honest, the only reason I gave him a 4 instead of a 4.5 or even a 5, if that's even possible, I had a couple questions about this in my last video. I'm not sure I could ever give anybody a perfect score though, because technique is an ever-evolving thing. To hand out a perfect score would indicate that they're done, they've completed it. But that's not possible with this endeavor. So I'm not sure that a perfect score is ever possible either. But regardless, the only reason I didn't score him higher is because I think he can do better. He has done better already. He has improved a decent bit just these past couple of years. And now you could rightfully make the argument back to me that I'm saying he didn't get a better score because he's already demonstrated that he has the capacity to get even better than he already is. Well, that's not fair. And maybe it's not, but the point stands. This is a technique analysis, and he has not reached his potential here. He could do better. He could increase the efficiency and safety of his mechanics even further than he already has, and likely lift more weight in the long run because of it. There is no doubt in my mind, and I can say that with certainty because he's already done this to a moderate degree while training in a highly suboptimal fashion simply for the sake of increasing his overall popularity and fame. So if he were to suddenly forget about fame and forget about likes and views and clicks and start training in an optimal, but let's be realistic, much less entertaining and kind of boring to watch fashion, there's no doubt in my mind that he would likely achieve a damn near perfect deadlifting technique eventually. But it's just not going to happen while he's confusing the issue to such a large extent by lifting as a showman like he is these days. But I can also say with certainty that at this point, I am absolutely sure that's not worth it to him anyway. He may be the best powerlifter in whatever weight classes he currently owns world record wise, but he is not and never will be the best powerlifter or best deadlifter that he could be by doing what he's currently doing. But again, that's not something he cares about. And who the hell could honestly blame him for that? It's powerlifting. Who the hell cares about powerlifting? And if we were in his position, we would all do what he's doing because he's making a living off of being a showman who performs insane feats of strength. It's the best job ever. And he's obviously monetized that particular shtick very well. He's well paid, and he's got millions of followers on social media. He's literally famous. And at this point, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I see him in a movie one day. Again, absolutely no hate and no judgment here on the choices that the man has made. I'm just calling it how I see it from this particular perspective in case anyone was wondering why I didn't rate him higher than I did. Anyway though, that's all I got for today guys. Please be sure to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And definitely leave me some love in the comments down below. And if you want me to hook you up with an in-depth technique analysis of your own, then shoot me an email at unkiri.elite@gmail.com and I'd be happy to pass some more information your way. Or simply visit my website, www.unkirielitefitness.com for more details. Keep training hard, and I'll catch you guys next time.